It should be okay, right?
Okay.
Yes.
Yep. There we go.
Let me get back to that. Sorry.
That's all right, thank you. So that's about me. What I want to do is introduce this to you, which you may already be aware of, but I want to just share some of my own learnings when I worked with the Enterprise Agreement with my last position at Rakuten, and some of the caveats, some of the things, some of the good things about it, some of the not so good things, and some of the caveats. But this is just going to be an overview, really. It's not going to go into too much depth. But if you have questions, just ask. I'll set some time at the end to ask questions as well. But if there's something on topic, just ask, and I will do my best to answer. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. There's quite a few reasons for getting into an enterprise agreement. Usually it's to do with cost or managing multiple subscriptions. Maybe it's to do with getting better visibility on the subscriptions and resources that you have. So some of the items I put up here is unified management. Bringing it all together. Governance. Having one bill, that's quite important because a lot of organizations will start out, someone's got a credit card and they go pay-as-you-go Azure subscription, and then someone else has got a credit card and they go and do one for their department, and then suddenly you've got multiple bills and multiple credit cards, and that's less than ideal for organizations as they grow. So bringing that together can be quite important. If you bring it all together, you can actually start to either charge back or show back, at least letting different departments know what they're paying and what they're costing. I put in organized subscriptions. Yes, I am from the UK, so I spell it with an S. And finally, best rates, but there is an upfront commitment. So for any of you that are not aware of the enterprise agreement, it's a very good way to organize your subscriptions. Everything's in the one place. And if you commit to a certain monetary spend with Azure, then you start getting discounts compared to retail. And I put a link at the bottom that you won't be able to remember, but I can bring that back up later. That's the...
Yes, after that we actually upload the presentations.
Okay, that's good. So next.
And I want to mention something, like Mike made a very interesting point that planning is very important, but I can tell you from my own experience, like starting using new technology, in this case cloud, involves a lot of experiment and not too much knowledge. And you try to evolve. So when we started using Azure, we never thought about all this structure, how we do it. You mentioned about the credit cards. Everything started with credit cards, right?
Yes.
So we didn't know what is the difference between a website and cloud service at that moment. We didn't know for what to use them. So we didn't think like how to do our billing properly. But now when you evolve, you start to ask questions, management start to ask why you're spending so much, and you try really to reduce the costs, which is very, very important.
Yeah, and that reducing of the cost was something that I helped my last company with quite a bit, looking at where we're overspending with Azure subscriptions and consolidating where we can. Now, I have stolen this diagram from somewhere else. I will freely admit that. However, I did change the color, so I think I can count it as mine.
Yes.
So what we've got here is the basic structure of the Azure Enterprise Agreement Hierarchy, or EA hierarchy. But what I'll do is instead of starting at the top, I'll start at the bottom, because this is what we're going to be mostly familiar with, the management portal. When we sign up for an Azure subscription, we get access to portal.azure.com if you're new school, and if you're old school, you go to manage.windowsazure.com. Once you blow the dust off the URL. One point to remember: if you see a URL and it's Windows Azure, it's part of the old methodology, and even in the hierarchy there is the old one, actually here at the account portal side. But if it's Azure, it's newer. So down the bottom, we're probably all very familiar with the management portal, portal.azure.com. And at that level, we have well, we have one service administrator, that's the old methodology, and co-administrators up to 199 that have the keys to the kingdom. They have access to everything under the old ASM model, which isn't very good. And thankfully, Microsoft, when they moved to the ARM structure, they introduced RBAC, role-based access control, which if you're not using it, start using it. It's brilliant. There's so many different roles in there. Plus, you can be creative and create your own roles, even based on ones that are already existing. You can also, I know I'm digressing slightly, but you can also assign this in the scope of the subscription, but also resource groups. So if you want to organize yourself within a subscription and delegate control to different roles within resource groups, you can get very granular, very detailed here. Anyway, sorry. So we're all pretty familiar with this. And what you might not be familiar with is this. Is the account portal. Even if you're signing up for pay-as-you-go, you actually get both of these. You'll get, what is this, account.windowsazure.com. So it's working on the old school way of things. And there is an account owner. Now, generally, when you set up the account, the subscription, your live ID that you're using gets turned into the account owner, which is default to the service administrator as well, but this guy can change this guy. So the service administrator can be changed by the account owner, and really it should be different anyway, from a best practice point of view. So this is still not really within the hierarchy, even though it's in here as well. But we have maybe a couple of subscriptions under the one account owner. And then maybe you've got another account owner that has a couple of subscriptions. I mean, it will vary depending on the organization you're in. With the hierarchy, you can bring this all together. So you can bring account owner A, account owner B, account owner C, bring them all together so they're all under the same hierarchy and all can be managed together. The third website or portal that you can use is EA portal. And we've got department admins in here. And they're kind of useless right now. Hopefully they're going to fix that. They're basically, well, not useless. They're good for looking at billing information and resource utilization if you switch that on. It's one of these things that's not actually on by default, is giving the department admins and the account owners access to billing info. But once these guys get a few more permissions, somewhere in between the account owners and the EA admins, then that'll become much more useful. And hopefully that'll come soon. EA admins, Enterprise Agreement admins, they have control of everything, but don't have control of everything. Let me kind of explain maybe a bit better. They have the ability to assign permissions for everything in the hierarchy. So from a security point of view, although you might have an account up here that has potential to take control over everything, generally it doesn't to start with. That's down to planning. I would suggest that if you've got an EA admin, you don't make them an account owner, and you definitely don't make them a service administrator. You keep those separate, keep those roles separate. But as I say, right at the top, we've got the EA admins, and just an FYI, you can have a read-only EA admin as well. What that's useful for is if you've got someone in accounting that needs to see the entire hierarchy of costs and billing and how it's divided up between different subscriptions, you really don't want to give them access to potentially get into all sorts of things down here from a technical point of view. So, as I say, read-only EA admin is an option. I've waffled at length. Have I covered everything on that slide? Oh, yes, I put this in at the bottom. So I'm going to jump back to RBAC and service admins. This is an FYI. Something I discovered recently is that if you're using the ARM portal, and you're got that tied to your own Active Directory or Azure Active Directory, you can't, at that point, you can no longer add Microsoft Live IDs as another administrator.
Oh, really?
Yep.
This is very nice.
However, no, you can't, right? However, there is a loophole. If you actually go into the old portal and add them as a live ID as a co-administrator, they then inherit permissions, so you can actually use that live ID in the ARM portal. I wanted to mention that for yourself because I think you guys will be having issues with
yes,
that.
Yes.
So there's a little loophole there for kind of legacy reasons, I think. Right, so unfortunately, I don't have any demos, but I've got some wonderful screenshots. I would show you and demo it if I had access to an EA right now, but unfortunately I don't. So this is not from an EA, but it might as well be. It's the account.windowsazure.com site for the account owner. This is mine. I used to have one called Visual Studio Enterprise, which has been cancelled, and I've got an MSDN. One that's active, thankfully. So even within the enterprise agreement hierarchy, the account owner may have like multiple subscriptions in here, very similar to the pay-as-you-go page. Actually, it's the same. Generally, this is where you can create subscriptions, rename them, transfer them, and cancel them. Although you can't transfer them within the EA, that actually is the enterprise agreement administrator that can do that. But if it's a standalone account owner, then that's where you can transfer the subscriptions. Next exciting slide is the EA portal. This is, again, I've stolen this from the interweb. I do apologize, and all credit goes to whoever I stole it from. It just basically shows that you've got 3 sections here. You've got a manage section, which is all to do with administrator access and the settings for the hierarchy, reporting, and notifications as well, which is less interesting. Within the EA portal, we've got the enrollment, which is a section here, so you can change settings like how do users authenticate to the portal. Now, this isn't for in your subscriptions. This is kind of like the outside, the packaging of your subscriptions and how that's managed. So any changes that you make here don't actually affect your workloads or the administration of your workloads. So you've got the auth level there. That's, you can set that to mixed, which is you can have live IDs or Azure AD or linked to your own AD. You can have live IDs only, and you can have Azure AD or a linked directory only as well. I'll talk about best practices later to do with that. Tells you your billing cycle status. There's actually some more information down there, but it got cut off. I apologize. There's a few different settings that are available in there that control the whole hierarchy. On the right-hand side, we've got a variety of enterprise agreement administrators. And again, in there, that can be set as read-only. This example's all got Microsoft accounts, but if it was linked to your AD, then you could have your Active Directory accounts in there as well. And reporting is probably a more interesting component, is finding out what you're spending and what you're spending on. Now, this is actually very verbose. There's a lot of information in there, but it has got good filters. What I've put down here at the bottom is you can export to CSV, but there's APIs also available, and Canyon knows a lot about that. You've been doing a lot of work with the APIs for getting billing information and usage information. So this can actually be used to actually, feed back information to the various departments. How much are they spending? What are they spending on? Is there something they're actually spending on that they have forgotten about and left running, and it's got premium storage and it's costing a fortune and they don't really know it? And that kind of thing does happen.
Yes, and I want to mention here, especially when we have the EA agreement and we prepay for a long time, and we're not so careful how much we spend, right? So that's why the APIs that Mike mentioned are very, very important. But also there is some nuances because at least in our case, we have a reseller in Japan. And we have a validate. I think you checked that thing, right? Like, I think the prices that are coming from the APIs were actually accurate, similar to what we get from the reseller.
So there is a caveat with that. Normally, if you're buying direct from Microsoft, if your agreement is directly with them, then the pricing tends to be accurate. However, if you're going through a reseller, which is quite common as well, then it's up to the reseller to publish their pricing to your portal, so you get accurate pricing information. So if they're not doing that, you have to ask them to do it. But yeah, so there are instances where that can be very useful. However, if you actually know your discount rates, then you can still utilize this information and just apply the discounts after the fact, at least as a guideline. Certainly with an organization that I used to work for, they would provide billing information internally. The accounting team would provide billing information to the various departments on a monthly basis. But sometimes it's good to know on a daily basis. Not up to the minute, but you know what's going on, and you know what your current spend is, what your burn is, and that's where this can become very useful. Again, you can use the APIs to actually just call that data. You can have read-only accounts to get that set up as well.
Yes, and just to share, like, we're prototyping, trying some interesting stuff, but basically it's very easy to code these APIs. It's very easy also to integrate with Slack. It's very easy to have like a daily or hourly reports, because some of the developers, for example, can play with API management, create the premium tier, and you have $3,000 per month for something that maybe they're not using, or some of the Godzilla virtual machines, right? So actually, it's very important. Maybe these things doesn't look like so much fun, but in the end, when the management asks how much we spend and why we're spending, if we spend so much, let's not spend anymore for cloud. It's actually very important for the developers and the people who are responsible for managing the Azure infrastructure to know what's going on before it's too late.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something I want to add to that, is that one way of looking at it is we're spending this money, we should cut back, save some money. Another way to look at it is if you can save money in subscriptions, maybe by consolidating, maybe you've got a service in one subscription, another service, and they have like crossover of what they're using. You can maybe bring those together. But if you can free up like a certain amount of money and forecast that for a year, the execs can then turn around and say, great, we now have that money to spend on something else. We can focus that on a different part of the company, do something good there. And so it's just another way to look at it.
Sorry for the one more time, but now the Azure Advisor is getting very, very powerful. And one of the things that Azure Advisor is very much focusing is actually to make a recommendation based on the things that you're spending, knowing your like spending patterns. And for example, we recommend you don't need so big virtual machine. Go to something like cheaper. And first, sounds not so logical, right? Microsoft wants you to spend more money on their infrastructure, but they know that if somebody understands that people are spending not so smartly the money, probably in the end they'll move to another provider or somebody that advises them something. Combining the information from this API with Azure Advisor, and I guess Microsoft introduced additional tools. There are like the whole companies that have a product that allows you to make these financial models, because actually the financial model is very complicated if you want to predict accurately in the future, right? It involves mathematics, statistics, and all that stuff. But at least for the basic things, if you start with these APIs, if you start cleaning your account structure using the advisor, using the APIs, maybe you'll be 70 to 80% covered.
Yep. It's the old adage that knowledge is power. The more you know about what's going on in your environment, the better control that you can have.
Yeah.
The smarter the decisions that you can make.
Can you define pricing alerts or something?
Do you mean as in usage?
Yeah.
Yes. So that's a good question. I think I will jump back a slide, maybe. Because something I didn't actually talk about was the departments. Yep, so at this level, Department A, Department B, departments are really tags. They don't actually change anything within the account admin, the account owners, or the subscriptions themselves. They just kind of tag what kind of subscriptions or what kind of account owners, belong together. What that does allow you to do is actually to lump the billing information together. And one of the features there is that you can set a budget, and it's a soft limit. It's not that you'll hit a hard limit and then services will stop. You can set a limit, you can set a budget, and you'll get notifications to nominated addresses or users, when you reach 25% of that budget, 50%, 75%, 100%. So that there is alerting available in that. That answers the question.
Yes, actually, I wanted to ask you, maybe later now you decide when to answer, but what are the best practices to organize this structure in your company? Like how many admins we should have? Like your suggestion.
Oh, everybody in the company should be a full admin. That's, you do laugh, but I came across a small company that was the case. It was quite a few years ago. Trying to undo that was messy. But yes, I've got a slide on best practices,
yes,
so
sure,
I'll move on to that. Talked about that. And billing, I just threw this in because it's quite informative as well. This is another part of the reports. The blue line is your commitment. So this particular subscription that's got a commitment of 2 million, 3 million, 2 million. But that's going down slowly because you're using up that commitment. This is your usage for each month. Again, this can be heavily filtered and adjusted so that you can actually see for one subscription, a group of subscriptions, a department, an account owner, everything this month, last month, last quarter, this quarter. It's very customizable and gives you kind of instant visualization of what's going on. It's pretty good for just kind of off the peg within the portal. But again, you can, if you're tapping into the APIs, then you can grab all that data and then do what you want with it and then generate your own wonderful PowerPoint slides with fancy graphics that are animated.
You also can integrate with Power BI, I think.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Okay, so I'd also like to talk about some best practices. This is by no means exhaustive, but just kind of the main ones to go by. When it comes to accounts in there, you have to really start with a live ID. You have to, but it's a good idea not to stick with those and get Azure AD linked or get your own Active Directory linked in, mainly so that you can actually control the accounts. You've got just imagine at the top of the hierarchy, you've got an enterprise admin who can effectively take control of everything in the hierarchy and get inside your subscriptions if they really wanted to. That's a live ID. That's just a username and password. That's brute force attack. We'll get into that, particularly as it's a live ID. So get away from live IDs. Enable multi-factor authentication. That's a really good one to do. You take away that brute force issue. Now, this is one I'm not entirely happy with, but it's the best that we kind of can come up with. With the account owners, you can have one account owner can have multiple subscriptions under it, but a subscription can only have one account owner. Meaning you've got, I don't know, the Bill is the account owner, and Bill goes on holiday for a month. I know it's crazy in Japan, but Bill goes on holiday, but you need to get into that account owner tree, and you need to do some administration in there. Now, Bill hasn't left his password, and well, you shouldn't be sharing personal passwords anyway, so you've got a bit of a problem. You could transfer the subscriptions into another account owner, but there are caveats with that as well, and I will discuss that in a moment. So the best case is actually, and I don't like this, but it's the best case you can do is maybe distribution lists with multi-factor authentication enabled within your own AD or Azure AD for the account owners. And I mentioned earlier, enterprise agreement admins, read-only is available. So, you know, if someone needs to see all the billing info, yeah, you can give them access to read-only. Just don't give them read-write access unless, you know, they really need it. In terms of subscriptions, yeah, I'm all about security and RBAC. So use RBAC, it's great. And you can, again, you can use it at the resource group level or subscription level. Oh, and this one, standardize your naming. You know, like when you create a new subscription, it's got a generic Microsoft Enterprise Agreement subscription, something like that. I can't remember now. Every time you create it, it's got exactly the same name, which might be fine for one account owner's got one and another account owner's got one. But as soon as you look at the billing info, you can't tell them apart because, well, not easy. You can, but not easily. The goods are different, but the naming is, you've got to make it human readable, really. So standardize your naming, name things so that people can understand what they're all about. And regular audits of user accounts and costs, particularly if you've got live accounts. You know, you've got someone that's maybe left the company and they still have access to everything. With Active Directory, you have got control of that, whether it's Azure or whether it's your on-premises. But with live IDs, not much control there at all.
Can we have like Azure Active Directory accounts on every single layer on the from EA enterprise administrators down to subscription administrator, or there's some limitations? Some layer only we have live IDs.
As far as I'm aware, you can use Azure AD, a linked Active Directory, or Microsoft live IDs at any point in the hierarchy.
Oh, great.
There's a slide I showed earlier, and there's a button that you can click to say what you will allow in the hierarchy, whether you want mixed or whether you want live IDs or whether you want like Active Directory.
Right. In terms of the audit, do you know a way that we can automate it, or some idea how, especially with the live IDs, like how we can do that, or is it just like a manual you check?
Currently, I don't know of a way that it can be audited automatically. I had spoken to Microsoft about administration and management using scripting administration and management within the hierarchy, and it's not a goer at the moment. I really like using PowerShell for that kind of stuff, and I'd queried them about that, but there's nothing available right now. It's all click, 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 type, 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 click to download as CSV, you know, that kind of nonsense. But hopefully that will change with time. It is a work in progress for them. Gotchas, caveats. Enterprise agreements purchased through resellers may not be accurate pricing. I mentioned that before. Department admins are not much used apart from billing and usage reporting. Another one I mentioned before. Only one account owner per subscription. I touched on that on the last slide. So if you want to move your the ownership of a subscription to another account owner for whatever reason, then there's a couple of things you need to be aware of. If it's a Microsoft account and you move it to another Microsoft account, because they're effectively their own directories, for security, it resets all of the administrators within the subscription. Like they're gone, right? Which shouldn't have an impact on your workloads, but it definitely have an impact on people trying to get into work on those through Azure. So that's worth a bit of planning if you're going to move from a Microsoft Live ID to another one. If you're moving from a Microsoft Live ID, MSA, to something in Active Directory, again, they're different directories, so you lose all your admins again. Same problem. However, if you're already on an Active Directory or Azure Active Directory and you move to another account within the same directory, there's no change because it's trusted. So this is something I learned the hard way. It doesn't seem to be well documented, but it's worth knowing. So if you're going to move these around, you need to be aware of that. And one other caveat, which was quite important for us, if you've got your MSDN, well, let's say you've got an account owner, and maybe you've been doing, you've got a pay-as-you-go account, maybe you've got a MSDN Visual Studio subscription in there as well, and you want to add that user as part of the hierarchy. Maybe it's, someone's got a live ID that you want to reuse. It will drag in all of the subscriptions that are associated with that into the hierarchy. Now, that might be a good thing. That might be what you want to do. But if it's something like MSDN, you're going to lose your credits. You're going to lose your discounts there. That's just something to be aware of. But it does also mean that you can bring in subscriptions into your hierarchy. So you've got your hierarchy, and there's one over there. You can transfer it in. That's one way to do it. Just on the MSDN Visual Studio note, you can enable a special dev test subscription. You can give that permission to an account owner to create these subscriptions, which give you discounts for dev and test. They're not fantastic discounts, but they're okay. An example would be if you've got, an example would be if you're using Windows VM, you get charged the rate for a Linux VM, which I think is about 30% discount. So they're giving you a discount on the licensing, basically. Not fantastic, but can be useful in the right context.
This is for dev test?
That's for dev test, yeah. But that needs to be enabled for the account owner. So you might have like 2 account owners in your hierarchy, which maybe they're allowed to create those subscriptions, but it's not for production. That breaks the licensing agreement. I think that's me. I've waffled at length here, and you're all nodding at the right time, so I think you understand my accent. So any other questions, comments, feedback?
Can we ask for Brexit? Or?
Oh, what's this? No, we got denied our second referendum, actually. So yeah, that's the latest, but we'll see how that goes. No questions? Great, okay. If there's anything crops up later on, just yes. I'm quite happy to have a chat and come speak to me. It's all good.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mike. So again, if you have questions after that from Mike, he's here. He'll reply. Okay, let's see how we go next. Let's see. Okay, so let's talk about Azure Functions a little bit. This is one of the technologies and the topics that I really like. And hopefully this year we see a lot of innovation because AWS sits a lot ahead from Microsoft in this field, which I hope you show us when you're ready. Like we talked before, Microsoft have the advantage to be second in the field or third, so they're fixing. We're fixing some of the things that are maybe not so well in the experience with Lambda. Google Functions are in the place. IBM created like an open platform, OpenWhisk. So it's very, very interesting space. Very, how I can say, very new. So we even have the issues with the architecture. What is the right architecture for using functions? The tooling is getting mature. We are seeing this thing with Azure Functions as well. And today we have like one very key element, which again doesn't look so fancy when you see it on the slide, but actually has a lot of importance, especially in the development of API that are based on functions. So let's make like a very quick introduction to remind ourselves what are functions. Actually, how many of you guys use functions already? Oh, we have very informed group. Yes, everybody. Okay, so maybe this is like a common sense for you, but again, this is event-based serverless compute experience to accelerate your development. And today, when I was researching about this talk, I was surprised. I didn't know that the former chief architect of Netflix, Adrian Cook, yes, he actually moved first to Battery Ventures. He became a venture capitalist, but now he moved to AWS. And he's, I think, VP of cloud strategy for AWS, which I think is a very good hit for AWS because he's a very smart guy. But the thing that impressed me today, he said like a lot of people are saying serverless. And I went to the serverless event here in Tokyo last year, and the guys from Amazon were talking. Serverless is basically something that you don't touch the virtual machines, which is okay. But now when we're talking about serverless, most of the time we're talking about functions. And the definition that Adrian gave was, serverless is the thing that allows you, the technology that allows you to scale it for 20 milliseconds and use it for half a second. So we are talking about very, very demanding workloads. So I think we need to define a little bit better what is serverless, because at least in the Azure world, serverless was existing from the beginning. We didn't have access to the virtual machines from the beginning, right? So in a sense, this is serverless, but today, in today's world, serverless is something more. This is hyperscale, very fast, scale up, scale down, very cost efficient. And again, like the main characteristic of Azure Functions, again, serverless, this means completely abstraction of the hardware, but again, very quickly scaling up and shrinking depending on the load. This that allows us and lead us to accelerate development with the nice tooling inside the portal as well as with the tools. In Azure, I don't have so much experience with AWS, but with Azure, we have like a very powerful bindings with most of the major services in the platform. We have very rich language support. And actually, the interesting thing is that the serverless ecosystem, especially in the open source serverless ecosystem, the JavaScript mapping is the standard. And we here see in Azure something similar. Node.js, it's very well positioned next to C#. And the people that actually developing and driving ahead Azure Functions, they're very passionate about Node.js, which I think is very, very good for the development of the platform. Because .NET is great, but also there are a lot of people that prefer to have something even more open than .NET. And I think this is the key. You pay just for only what you use, so it's very cost efficient. And it's a great candidate for making very, very efficient solutions. And these pictures, maybe you know very well, these are like screenshots from the Microsoft portal, but I want very quickly to go through these scenarios. So functions you can use for different things, but when you go in the portal, you see there are templates. One of the templates is around time-based. So for example, every 15 minutes, you can create your database. And this is straightforward with functions. You don't need to use timers. Timers are actually integrated behind the scenes for you as cron tabs. The next one is event processing, right? A real-time event. No, this is like a event sourcing, event processing kind of. And so we are like we are adding files to storage. After that, we are transforming to comma separated values and importing in Power BI. Another one is we upload the file to one of the providers like a OneDrive or Dropbox. And after that, we have event that we listen to, use the Graph API, and gather some knowledge from the data. And this is interesting that it's taking a little bit closer to the topic today. We have like a loaded web page with webhook. We have a kind of event that allows us to generate advertising based on the action of the user. And then we create like a very smart advertising based on the user profile and actions. One more, here like we are taking photos and we are scaling it in different sizes, basically creating thumbnails or processing it. Straightforward experience. And this is the thing that I mentioned before, that real-time processing. The data is coming, flowing in our system, and we have functions that allows us to aggregate and transform the data so we can easily push it to SQL. Imagine that we have no structure or not structured data, and we change the format and push it to SQL. And of course, this is something that we talked a little bit last time. This is in the area of chatbots. Here, this is kind of a little bit old picture, but now we know that we have the bot service, which basically internally is based again on the intelligent part that Azure provides, as well as some functions. So very, very quick introduction of a few scenarios. And again, functions actually came from web jobs, and where we use web jobs we use for like a background processing, sitting very close to our websites, actually on the same virtual machine. So you can imagine this scenario, like when you upload a picture, you have a web job that will create the thumbnails for you, or it will clean the database or some temp files, something that is actually not in the front end, but in the back end, and is running separately from the website. And again, the web jobs gave us this foundation, the framework that we can build and create the functions in the context of Azure. And the great advantage is that the last two bullets, the dynamic plan, which really free us from thinking, oh, how many service plans I need to run this website, how many requests per second I need to support. Ideally, the platform should take care of all that stuff. In theory, we know that we need to test and benchmark and see, is this the case? But in theory, at least takes a big part of the headaches. And then the last one, we are going to this serverless model with Azure Functions in the case of Azure. And I think I showed this slide, but just let's revise it. So this is the abstraction layer that is very important to realize in Azure. So going to the bottom, you have more control, but you have more responsibility. Going to the top, you have less control, but ideally you have less responsibility in terms of managing infrastructure. So again, on virtual machines, you're responsible for updating the software if you want to do to be like this. And Docker containers, you have the abstraction, especially when you use orchestrator like Kubernetes, so you don't need to allocate container to a host. You have worker roles, web jobs, but today we're talking about functions, and currently functions is on the top of the abstraction there. This is the place that you really focus on your business scenarios, and you completely forget about the underlying infrastructure in virtual machines. And I want to talk a little bit about the architectural concept that we've seen, and actually that are pushing ahead the concept of functions today. So we know very well, most of our applications, maybe several ways ago, this was the norm. Like we have like a monolith application, which basically contains all of our logic. We can have internally some kind of separations of modules, but the whole system comes as a one big piece, and we deploy it as this huge piece. And here, maybe you're a little bit confused, like why we have a speed of development. But this is in the sense of that we can deploy the whole system as one. So one of the disadvantages, we'll see on the next slide, but one of the disadvantages of microservices and chunking the application in smaller pieces is now we have more moving parts. And organizing the process to be really mature around these moving parts is not always so easy. In the case of Netflix, and other companies, I'm sure you can end up with thousands of microservices. So having a good DevOps practices, a lot of automation is a must, and not all of the teams are so prepared for that. But here, again, talking about the monolith, we have the whole system, we have the client, and the whole system is one abstraction for us. We deploy it as the one big thing. And again, the disadvantages is everything is so much more connected. It's very difficult to build a system that is loosely coupled. If it's like a one big thing. It's so much easier if they're really separated. So then there is like a physical boundaries that really push you to improve your architecture. And again, since it's a bigger thing, the things are a lot connected and the complexity increases. Then we go to the next level, which is microservices. So now let's imagine that we have application that has both games and users. Now let's say, okay, why they should be staying in one application, let's have two different applications. So we have one that is dedicated for users, another dedicated for games, and we have the APIs for that. So again, now we start to break the application. What is the advantage? This application a lot more focused on their custom domain, on their sole purpose, right? What is the disadvantage? Again, this is a very interesting point, right? Because you say, hey, why this is slower development? Even when I was preparing the slide, I was challenging myself, why it's slow? It's slow, it's because you really need to build automation, because now you have these parts that are very much dependent. If you update one of these applications without taking into account the interfaces that they expose to our application, you can easily bring your whole solution down. So that's why it's kind of a little bit slower, because you need to make it work together, right? And now the next slide, maybe you know this term, maybe not, but now we have something small, which is called nanoservices, right? So now we go to a very granular model, which is we go to a method, right? Before that, we have like one big thing. After that, we have kind of services. Now we have just a method of that. I was joking with my friends in the company, say, hey, guys, what will be after nanoservices? Like, can we change it to something smaller? And we are still not confident what will happen, but basically it's getting interesting, right? So you can see here we have like the clients is the same again, but this time we have like one single solution that is responsible for getting the games, another one for deleting the games, another one for getting the users and deleting the users. And now, again, there is advantages and disadvantages. The advantages, very much focused code, like, ideally should be very small. So I'm sure that you read about Netflix experience and Adrian, who was sharing, but basically said that if you need to rewrite your microservice, or even in the case of a nanoservice, they don't do it. They just throw it and they build a new one. So it's very interesting concept, and takes, I think, a little bit time to realize. But you can see very granular, very small scope. But again, you can think that one of the disadvantages that is not in this slide is that you need to repeat yourself for some parts. For example, before that, you were able to share in the context of monolith. You have reusable components, you have reusable libraries that you push to the whole solution. Now, maybe some things need to be repeated, but again, you're independent. If you want to change delete games, you change only that part, right? And one interesting model that I found also online is some people just mix the both, right? You have a microservices like the first one, and after that you have a nanoservices. So maybe this is the best solution, because if we push ourselves to a limit, oh, I'm doing only nanoservices. Okay, maybe this is okay for your domain, but not so much okay for me. Actually, today on Hacker News, there was like a second article that was defending the monolith. And I was planning to put the graphics, but I didn't have time to that. But basically, they drew a very interesting graph. And if I remember correctly, it was something like this. So they were putting the microservices here. And they were putting the monolith here. And they said that monolith is typical for enterprises. This is typical for internet scale application. And here the complexity is low complexity, but a lot of traffic. And a lot of traffic. Here you don't have so much traffic, and the complexity is high. So if you like maybe one example can be Snapchat, right? Like something that is there is a lot of traffic, but in general the function is not so complicated. And here you have something big, monolithic, that I think everybody from this group have in their companies. And I think the guys in these articles, they're arguing, okay, monolith is better in this case. You don't need microservices because it's a one huge thing, and it just better fits in the context of monolith. Because there is this sense, oh, we found now about microservices, everything should be microservice. And maybe this is not also the right way. I think you should analyze your needs. I really recommend you read the article. I barely checked a few paragraphs of it, but I think it's useful. Okay, so let's get back to our function. So why I was explaining so much about that thing, because one of the difficulties here is on this slide. So see what's going on. This is our client. This can be mobile client. This can be a web app. So you already see something. This client needs to know about all these applications, right? So if this is a mobile application, I need to know, okay, this is the endpoint for get games. This is the endpoint for delete games. This is the endpoint for delete user. This is the endpoint for get user. So imagine that if I have like a 100 different calls, like what's going on? I have like a huge list in my application, say, okay, this is delete user, this is, and then if I want to change the delete users or part of it, if I want to host a new place, how do I do that efficiently, right? Of course, there are workarounds. We can put it after traffic manager, all that stuff, but it's not very elegant. So the team behind the Azure Functions, I think, is going in a very right direction. So basically, they introduced new solution, basically to answer these issues. So first, it's difficult to manage large solutions in a single functional app. Ideally, every single functional app has a lot of functions, and each function should be with the scope of one method. But again, these functions can grow really high. Imagine if you break a one API that is complex API with, let's say, 20 or 30 methods, this will be a huge list and very difficult to manage, right? The other one is you can use isolation between the individual components, but this usually works for triggering, but it's a little bit difficult for APIs. And again, we need to be a little bit careful because Azure Functions is not so silver bullet, right? Maybe it's not the best solution for all APIs. Ideally, this is event-driven computing. So Martin Fowler was defining event-driven computing, saying event-driven computing is based on the notion that you fire an event and you don't care about the response. APIs is not exactly this. You have a request and you're passionate about the response. You want the response. The response defines your behavior. So I think it deserves a little bit different attention. And one of the problems that I mentioned is when you create the function app, every single app has a host name. And it's getting a little bit difficult to track because you can have kind of standards how to name these applications, but at some point, I think you lose track. And another issue is difficult for clients, especially when switching to testing. So the solution is, as you guys, these are the proxies. So what is the big deal with the proxies? So they're actually abstracting the endpoints from the client. So we have a client, we have the proxy, after that we have the functions behind the proxy. So it allows us to have this abstraction layer, so there is no like a direct binding between the client and the function app. And allows us also to define like an API surface for multiple functional apps. The power of proxies is actually that it's not limited to the function app that they're hosted in. Basically, you can abstract any single endpoint that you have internet access to it. So you'll see now in the demo, it's very easy, very straightforward. But please remember the title, this is still in preview, so it's very new. You see even now in the feature set that it looks very basic for now, but I think this is just the beginning. So let me show you, maybe you already tried, but just to make it sure that we are on the same page. Okay. How many of you guys tried the proxies already? AWS. Do they have proxies or they use the API gateway?
They use API gateway to bounce into
Yeah, this is very interesting. After that, I'll touch. I have a special slide about that. Actually, I have a friend, a person that is from my country. And I ask him like, guys, like, why not using API management? So I have a slide for that. He's on the.
I can tell you from experience, it was not pleasant.
Yeah.
To set up API gateway with that.
Yes. Okay. So you can see I have like some money in this subscription yet. Okay. So let's create a new function app. So basically, the proxies they reside inside of the function app. So let's. Let me create. Okay, let's create a new function app. Let's go with test. Yeah, this is the cool part. Consumption plan is actually the dynamic plan, and app service plan is the other one, the normal. Storage account, it will generate some value. It's relatively fast. So again, the proxies they're part of the function app, but they're not limited to the function app. So you can map these proxies to the resources that inside of the function app, to other function apps, or any other REST endpoint that you have a network connection to it. So let's see how fast it will be. Okay. Looks it's very fast. Already done. Okay, let's go and see. Test. Okay. No, it's not done yet. For what are you using the functions in AWS in your case? If it's okay to.
No, that's fine. We use it when we have situations where we have a large customer, say with 200 to 500 locations. They want to, they're out of a lab environment, but before they push the production to all of their locations, they want to just push it to one. So we use the gateway to route to like a test version of the service. The service that would have been in lab a day ago is now forwarded that way, whereas all the other traffic. And we do that by we put headers in the HTTP request to tell you like the context of the location, so we know how to direct it and stuff like that.
Nice. Okay, so we saw like I think it took something around 2 minutes to create. So I just want to walk you the first time. After that, I have a prepared function, so we go with them. But the UI, I think it can be a little bit improved, but it's workable. So let's create something that is based on C#. Let's get one of the ready templates, HTTP trigger. So I don't like this thing too much, too many scrolls, but it's still fine. Yes. Okay, and now we'll create the function app. Inside you can see this is our source code. Actually, this resolution doesn't look very nice. We will not modify anything more. You can see here, this is our test space. We can run it, and we can see that we have some output. Basically, this is very simple application. It gets the parameter and prints out the parameters with some greetings, say hello, something. Right? Nothing so special. The interesting part is with the proxy. So let's copy the URL of this application. I'm sorry about the resolution, but here, by default, you see proxies, but first you need to enable them. So you go to the function app settings. You see here some settings, and on the bottom you see enable Azure Functions proxy preview. You hit on, and now they're enabled. So it's a little bit confusing because actually the UI allows you to create the proxies and everything will be the same, but they will not work. So just be sure when you create that thing. let's create a new proxy. We'll say like a test proxy. Test proxy. I'll say test proxy. And here we are putting the whole URL. As you can see here, the URL of this application contains the usual Azure website's URL. After that, we have /API. This is the name that I gave to the function app. And after that, we have code. This is basically the secret key that is used for authentication. So now, the sole purpose of this proxy in our case is to replace all these things with just something that is a lot more friendly test proxy in our case. So let's create that thing. Takes just a second, or at least I hope so. Okay. So now we have a test proxy. Let's copy that. So this is, of course, a simple scenario. And let's say, can you? Let me go in 1 second. Okay. There is content type. Post. After that, I explain about the different options. Let's create one object. Okay, and this is hello Canyo, and also I think we don't need that thing. If it's post, it's the same behavior, or if it's get, it will be like this.
Name equals Canyo. That'll work for this demo. Yeah, Q equals.
Okay. I didn't get you.
What's that? If your query string?
Yes.
It should be.
Yes. You're right. Because the function, the template expects. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the same thing. So let's go back and show you why it's working for all the methods. Here. Where's my mouse? Okay, here. So as you can see here, like it's very the UI, the feature set is very basic. So basically, you're giving you're giving a name, and after that, you're giving a route template, and after that, you can select like what the HTTP verbs are basically allowed. So the default one is all methods, but you can select. So let's say I just make it for get. So then, if we come here again and try with the post, let's remove that one. Yeah, not found. So it's not supported anymore. But if I have just the name and go back to get, it should work. Yes. So now we restricted it. Only get works, right? But before that, it was all methods. So this is proxy, super simple, right? Super simple, nothing strange, very quick, very straightforward. But what is the real value? So let me go, I have prepared, which one was it? I think this one. Here I have one function app. And I want to walk you through a few scenarios that the proxies are very, very useful. So one of the problems of this UI that's it's not refreshing always, at least for me. But let's say it's just a better version. So again, I have like one function that is called greeting. It's again the same template nothing else. Like you pass parameters, say hello, your name. So this is it. So this is not the interesting part. The interesting part is the proxy. So let me find my mouse again. Go down to the proxies. Okay. So now we have like several proxies. So first, let's go to the greeting proxy. So again, I gave it a name. It's called greeting. The URL is greeting. All methods. So this is exactly what I showed you. We just see one small difference. So now we have this percent, and between the percents, we have some variable that's called like a backend URL production. So this is one like a small integration that allows us to inject variables from the app settings. So you can see here, if you go to the function app settings, and if you go to the configuration app settings, and if you go a little bit down, you see that I have like a very simple variable. It's called like a backend URL production, and this is the URL of the actually in this case the same function app. But you can imagine that we can have one for staging, one for development, and then have like a different proxies for the different values, and manage that thing directly from the app settings. And this is very powerful, especially if you have issues in production. You don't need to deploy. You just go over there, modify, and everything gets in place, right? Okay, so let's go back. Let me close that stuff. So this is the first proxy. The next one, it's a little bit modified again. This time we have only support for GET. I already showed you this thing. But the other part is something interesting. We have here these curly brackets and say like a greeting / name. And the powerful part of this name in the curly brackets is actually we treat this a variable and we can pass it to the function app. So if you go here in the back, we'll see that we are actually passing it as name equals name. So then we can really have like a very RESTful look of our proxy. So if we take that one and go again in Postman, continue with get, but this time replace name with Canio. Should be the same, yeah. Canio. So you see, like the first time it's a little bit slow because this function didn't work. In the next execution, very fast. So you see, we are under 50 milliseconds most of the time. I think the first one maybe 300 milliseconds. So very, very fast. But again, this allows you a little bit to play with the route of the request and make it a little bit more neat than usual. So you don't need to have these query string parameters. You just make it very, very RESTful. Another very useful use case is if you have versioning. So in my case, I have like a second function app. Of course, here the change is trivial because this is a demo. The only difference that I have is I have a comma, and after that I have an exclamation mark. But you can imagine that we developed a second version of our Nanoservice, and now we want to expose it from a proxy. I create a new proxy, and this time I'm exposing /v2. So even though there is no any notion for v2 in the function app itself, on the proxy level, it will look very neat. Of course, I wasn't very consistent in my naming. The first one should be greeting /v1 /. But you can imagine that if we follow a stable naming convention, it will look very nice. And the user say, okay, now understand this is v1, this is v2, even though behind the scenes they're completely separated. And create this notion of really a straightforward naming convention. So let's try that one. So here I don't have parameters, so it's a little bit more basic. So I need to pass it. Let's see. Name. No, didn't work. What happened here? In general, should change it. Let me see which methods were available for that. All methods should work. Sample function API greetings. Let's try that one. Interesting. Let's see what's going on here. So I think I was using this this function now. Let's first test this function up. So let's do some debugging here. So this is my test. I want to run it. Let's see what is the output. So the output looks great. So let me copy the function URL. Maybe I didn't copy the right function URL. Let me go to the proxy and see what is the value over there. So I want to be here. Save it. Really sorry about this resolution, but I'm not sure that. And let me try one more time here. It works. I guess I didn't copy the right one. So you can see now there is slight difference, right? This comma and this space. And the next one, try to copy this thing. And go to the next proxy that has the slash name. Let me paste it here. You can see like it's very fast, like super easy to do it. And you have a new proxy in seconds. Please pass the name or query string in the request body. Why? It was name. Okay. So now something interesting, right? I copied this from the previous function and I forgot to add the name. So I'm capturing the name on the proxy level, but I'm not passing to the backend, and the backend is confused because the backend accepts to get query string parameter with the name or to come as a post body parameter for the post. So if we do like this, name equals name, it should work. Okay, this works. Yeah, so very small. So yeah, this is one. And there is one more, like a mock bin. I'm not sure that you guys use this service. I use it a lot because we started working with this company that provides the service, but this is very basic service to mock your responses. So you can come here and create a bin. Bin is basically a placeholder for API response, and you can modify the body. In this case, I can use like some of the samples that they prepared, let's say like a JSON, and they'll populate for me something here. And I create this bin, they'll generate for me unique identifier. But the valuable part of that is that I can use this URL for integrating with Pipe service. So now this is the sample content, hello world. But the cool part is that I can integrate my proxy with external service. This is complete external service. It's not hosted in Azure. Just we have like a REST access to it. And here, this is another option that we currently have in order to manipulate the REST URL. We have these curly brackets and says you have the start, and after that, rest of the path. Basically, it means that please match everything after the after mockbin slash and pass it to the mockbin.org. So this means that I'll be able to open every single mockbin that we have this this format. So let's try that one. So we are taking this. Okay, we are coming here, and we will replace the second part of the URL with the UID that I got. Okay. If you come here, you see hello world. Again, it was slow. First time, it was 1 second. Now it's like 200 milliseconds or 500 milliseconds because actually goes outside of Azure, right? I'm going to the proxy. Proxy goes to Mockbin, waits for Mockbin to respond, and again through the proxy comes here, right? But also we can do something else. We can do /view, and the /view will show me a little bit more metadata about the Mockbin. And now, why it's possible? Because we have like a matching for everything after Mockbin, it's passed to the Mockbin service. And in the case of Mockbin, the Mockbin understands the UID, but also UID/view to show this metadata information. And that's why it was working. If we take this URL and show it in a browser, will show us actually the Mockbin URL, the Mockbin UI. So again, we had like a function app. I don't have like a demonstration for now function app, but it's the same thing basically. If we can go outside of Azure, it's obvious that we can make a connection to another function app. So the cool part to remember, there's not so many options. It's very basic so far, but let me see. It's very basic so far, but 1 second, where's my mouse? Yeah. So you need to remember this thing, curly brackets, rest of path. This will give you everything that is after this, everything that is after your template here, after your pattern will be passed to the backend service like this. The other one is you can predefine parameters like that. Make it a little bit more restful, or this will be also like a query string parameter. The other useful use case is versioning, and we already showed that thing like you're passing name, and after that, inside you're passing to the backend in the format that is the best suited for that. And this is the other one. You can inject some values from the app settings. So basically, 3 main commands that you can modify the URL of the service. So you can see super basic. So I asked my friend from app service team. Let me see, where is the slide? Yeah, this is exactly what to explain. You're basically passing the variables, and after that you're passing to the backend service. You're matching everything after the pattern, passing to the backend service. This is that setting stuff. And we show this thing and this thing. So maybe I can show you this part. If we go to Azure, Azure Functions are very nice because everything is like based on very lightweight framework, like web jobs, and everything is like a JSON and JavaScript. And after that, in my opinion, for me, it looks that it's augmented to work with .NET and C#. But really, you see that it's very well fitted for Node.js, for very quick prototyping, very quick development. So I think it's very, very pleasant to work. So if you're determining one of the functions, if we return one of the function apps, if you come here, you can see, and if you go to view files, if you go in this folder, where is it? Actually, it's not showing here. It's not showing here, but you can see it from other place. Let's go to the function app settings. If you go to the kudu, let me see, I'll remember the right place. But basically, we can see the descriptions of the proxies inside of the function app, which I think is very powerful because in the end, it will help you to build your proxies when you're not developing in the portal. Because you remember from our previous presentations, you have 2 ways of develop these functions. One in the web portal, but then you don't have continuous integration. It's not very scalable, right? And the other one, you have a continuous integration, but then you cannot edit in the web portal. So it's interesting to see in the future, will the team allow us to do both? I think it will be very powerful. So let's see this file. So you can see here, this is the description for the proxies. And these proxies have like several parameters, but again, the description is very straightforward. So here we are saying first, we are naming it. This is the name, set greeting proxy. This is JSON document in the end. This is object. The name of the first proxy is greeting proxy. The match condition is route greeting. So this is basically /greeting that will be used when you use the proxy. This is the backend URL. You see that it's exactly what you set in the UI. And then comes the next one, the greeting proxy get. So this is the second proxy. This is the route with the name parameter. The method is get. Here you see that you didn't see anything because everything was allowed. It wasn't limited just to one HTTP verb, but everything was supported. We have the backend URI. And this continuous and continuous. Basically, everything that you see in the UI currently, you see it here. So if you want to build your own proxies without the UI, you just need to construct this JSON file. Now, when you commit the changes to Git, and after that, push with continuous integration to Azure. So now let's get back to the presentation. This is the same thing. Again, you have the proxy name, the matching conditions, the verb, the route, the backend URI. Straightforward. And again, my favorite question, because I was looking this thing, and I have been using API management for 2 years now. And when you look this thing and you start to think, okay, Azure has API management. Why don't we integrate with API management, right? And I asked my friend, and he said, you know, we're very much more focused on API development. And I say, okay, but API management also helps the API development. He said, yeah, but API management is actually for building and selling your APIs. It has a lot more features. And if you use API management, you know, there are like I think now around 30 policies. And policies are actually the logic that you can execute on top of the requests. You can modify, turn JSON to SOAP, SOAP to JSON, throttling, URL modification. So what we have today in the Azure Functions proxy is just like a URL transformation, very basic, very basic. API management is a lot more enterprise in that case because first it's a lot heavier, but because it's a lot more powerful. So here, when I was trying to compare that, I think the focus with the proxies is more on API development. My friend told me that in future there will be like a feature overlap between API management and the proxies, but in general, maybe it won't be so much that you ask yourself, oh, should I use API management or API proxy? And API management is a lot more focused on packaging and selling APIs. In terms of features, again, currently we have only routing with very slight modification, as you see, these 3 features. In API management, you have so much more. You can connect even to your enterprise backend services that are private solutions. You have throttling, you have security, you have caching, a lot more powerful. But again, see just the price. Functions proxy works like functions. You pay just for the calls. And when I was trying this thing, I think I spent from yesterday to today like maybe 10 yen. With API management, you're spending big money. I think the premium tier is around like $3,000, but this comes with a lot of power and stability. But again, I think in the future, probably we'll see the proxy is very much tied around API development that allows you very quickly to prototype and to have the speed that Azure Functions bring. And API management will be the feature that actually will allow you probably to expose in long term. So I could envision architecture like this. We have the mobile app, we have API management in front that probably integrates the Azure Functions proxy that abstracts the functions and has like one common environment or one common surface in front of the functions. And behind the scenes, you can have like API app, you can have function app, you can have like a REST endpoint. But here you have like your billing, like your restrictions. So currently I see it that way. Maybe in the future it will be possible the mobile app to go directly to the functions proxy if there is a security that really makes it acceptable for your use cases. But still, I think there will be a good collaboration and like potential integration points between API management and Azure Functions proxies. And this is it. Thank you very much. So let's see, do you have questions?
So API management can't call an Azure function directly?
It can, because API management actually can call any endpoint. API management, you know the story of API management. API management was originally acquired by Microsoft. It was an external company. The solution was hosted on AWS. They spent a lot of time rewriting it. Now it's on Azure. But the idea is that you can integrate any REST endpoint. You can integrate even an API on AWS. Now, I'm not sure about the latency because if you jump between the cloud providers, but in general, it's possible. Also, it's possible with ExpressRoute and VPN to go to your internal APIs that are not exposed to internet. So API management is like a very big, huge, at the same time, very powerful in terms of functionality solution. So if you have network visibility, if it's REST endpoint, but also SOAP, they from recently support SOAP, this is your like a typical solution to integrate. One thing that currently I think it's missing for API management that you cannot deploy it in your data center. Some people I think don't like this thinking, but I think the team is going in another direction. They don't want to create a product that you deploy. Maybe it will come as part of Azure Stack or something like this, but in general, I can tell you like API management is great, but it's, in my opinion, it's a little bit heavy product. At the time, recently I've been working with more like open source API gateways that are based on Docker and all that stuff. Like they're a little bit faster. And I was talking to the team. They said that, but you don't need to provision API management so often, and they're right. When you have it, it's very stable. Like it's super stable. We never had issues with API management for, I think, close now to 3 years. Other services are failing. The website storage, API management is really behaving very well, very stable. And for us, at least in the beginning, it was very useful because we're using caching. And we didn't have deployments of the APIs in different continents, but we were deploying API management and we're caching locally. And this was working fine for us because we have like a read-heavy APIs, not so much write-heavy. So again, API management is a great solution. For me, it's interesting how the proxies will evolve because obviously there is a lot of overlap, even now in this early stage. So yes, I think it will be interesting. So what do you think about the proxies? Do you think they're useful?
I haven't used them yet, but I had a separate question. Has anybody tried pre-compiled functions?
No, what is that?
You actually create a class library.
Yeah.
And then in your function.json, you point to that DLL. And then it will run your compiled DLL.
Oh, interesting. And you can call methods from the DLL inside of the function.
Yep. Nice. So you have to define an entry point, and then after that, you're good to go.
Nice.
It was really, really interesting, but I've been having some troubles with deployments.
Okay.
Getting that bin folder into Azure is portable.
Oh, okay.
So I was wondering if anybody had any experience with that. But
I remember there was a special way of referencing the DLLs, but I guess this is not your problem, right?
Yeah, that's not the problem. It's actually getting the files from my local spot to Azure. I mean, I'm pretty sure they have like an FTP way of doing it, but looking on their wiki, there's not a lot of information there anymore.
Okay, so maybe we can ask them. If you pass me a question, maybe I can connect you with the people that I know. This team is very open. They're really passionate to hear from the people. I think your scenario is very interesting. So let's try to ask them. Also, they have like I think they have a feedback channel, and also, do you know there is one guy? I think he is there like a senior program manager. Yochai. after that we can look for him. I can give you
that'd
his,
be great.
his Twitter account. Chris Anderson, maybe you know him. He's very famous. He usually promotes the functions. We can try to get him. Let's make this a cool demo. Maybe you can show it next time. I think
I can do a little bit.
Yeah.
Done right now, but
do you want to show it now?
I'm good. Thank you, though.
Okay. Yeah. So I think functions is very interesting, and I'm sure that we'll see a lot of people doing very interesting things with functions. This can be one example. So if you have like even small demos, please don't hesitate to show them. 5-10 minutes, everything's fine. Yeah, you can see here most of my demos like are based on the templates that are in the portal, like a very basic. I do this thing on purpose because I really want people to see that it's so easy to start. Because sometimes when somebody shows you like a demo from several thousand lines of code, you get really easy lost in that. Okay.
Do you pay for the functions proxy, or are you paying for the function?
I think you're paying for the function. Let me show how much I'm spending for that. Like it's really minimal. Where's the portal? So I haven't been using this subscription a lot. I just see 5 yen. And of course, this is just for prototyping, right? I call it like maybe several hundred times. And it's not so much, but 5 yen. And this is like this is the MSDS subscription with 15,000 yen per month. Of course, if I create one of the virtual machines or app service plan, even though I don't use it, probably it will be gone, right? So I think that's why people are really passionate about that. That's why they try to think, okay, how can I migrate my API to this? Because this will be a huge saver. And again, even if you run Docker, if you run Kubernetes, again, you need to pay for the virtual machines, right? And this thing, it's so much easier. So I'll guess probably this will become the default option when you try to prototype something quickly. And after that, depending on your requirements, you need to move it to, let's say, a little bit more controlled environment if you want. I've also seen like a lot of people, especially in the early days of functions, not so sure like how it's scaling. There is not a lot of information. I think in AWS also it's not very clear how it's scaling. A lot of people are guessing, are there containers behind the scenes? What's going on? You saw here like there is like a very big difference, like 10 to I think 15 times first execution and next execution.
There's a huge cold start cost.
Yes. And now when we're on this serverless event that we have in Tokyo, basically it was hosted by AWS, but there was Azure Functions, there was IBM with OpenWhisk, and only the guys from IBM, they were very open, and they say we have Docker containers, we have like a configurable, actually at that moment it wasn't configurable time, but they said that there's like a Docker containers that run the functions, and if the container is not used for 5 minutes, it shuts down. And at that point it wasn't configurable, but probably it be in the future. So I guess there's something similar in Azure and in AWS, maybe something a little bit more scalable. I also expect Google Functions to be very powerful. They have very strong infrastructure as well. But again, I think it's not even that bad, because most of the time, especially if it's API, there will be constant hits on the API. And if the first call is slow, I think it's still acceptable to a certain point. So I think it should be good. Again, there is a lot of conversations like how is the tooling? I know that Azure Functions has a new tooling. I tried that. It's interesting because with the tooling, you can see that it's really the C# experience requires more effort than the Node.js. And you see really the team, this is very interesting. The team really tried to catch up the .NET experience with the Node.js, but obviously the Node.js, because the platform and the ecosystem is so much around open source about JavaScript, it's able to innovate a lot faster there. So again, one more reason to brush up our knowledge about JavaScript, see how that works. Okay.
Can I ask?
Yes, please.
What is the restaurant you use?
Postman.
Postman.
Yes. You can there was like recently again on a Hacker News, I think, article. They started as a Chrome app, like extension for Chrome, but now they have a native experience. And it's very powerful. I recommend you, let me show you this thing. I didn't know that Postman is so powerful, but recently I watched Channel 9. I mean, if you go to Azure Friday, I really recommend you. There is like one of developer experience evangelists. This one using REST with DocumentDB. Of course, this is like in the domain of DocumentDB, but you can watch the video and see that Postman is very powerful because allow you to have like a scripts that they execute before the request call is performed. So you can have like a little bit preparation. You have tests. You have also functionality here that allows you to manage variables. So I don't use it here, but you can abstract, let's say, this part of the URL and say like my environment URL, and then find this variable in the so-called environments here. And then if I want to share this Postman collection with Mike, but I don't want to give him my client credential and secret keys, they're stored separately. So I have like a file for the keys and the secrets, and I have one JSON file with the Postman collection. And also it's very easy to share. Where is that? It's very easy to share. So I have, if I want to share, I don't see it. If I want to share, I can come here. It can generate for me a link. And after that, I can give you this link, and you can import that thing in your Postman. So it's free tool, very nice. I was surprised actually. I think it's developed in India, by Indian company. Very nice too. I think it's now the default.
Yeah, it's probably the best.
Yes.
REST tester.
Yeah, before that, a lot of people were using Fiddler, but unfortunately, Fiddler was bought by the company. The company from my country, and we are so proud. But obviously, Postman innovated that, so it's very good too. I really recommend it. It's very nice, and it's getting more and more powerful. I haven't used tests, but I think it's something also interesting. So it became almost like a IDE for REST.
Yeah, you can read stuff out of CSV files with the test, and then just spam requests.
Yes. Another thing that I really like, I'm using Windows, but I now very often work with people that are actually using Macs. So they ask me for curl, so you can generate code in different languages as well. And this really helps when you need to test something quickly on Mac, Windows, and so on. So yeah, very good. Maybe you can show us like advanced topics for Postman after some time.
Now I use the advanced REST client on Chrome extension.
Oh.
So, but this is more convenience.
Yeah, I think it's good. And yeah, like. Yeah, fine for you. I don't remember exactly his name, but he has a very unique name. The program manager for Service Fabric. Not for Up. Oh, do you remember who is the? There was one program manager in App Service. Yochai.
Ah, yes.
With long hair.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So definitely, please send me a message and I'll send you. And I think the other guy that is, I think the right person is Chris Anderson. He's working on the function, so I guess this guy. In the middle.
We can't see your screen.
Sorry. So this guy in the middle, fortunately. So before that, he was working on mobile services, Node.js part, and that's why Node.js is so well developed in functions, because he just this guy. So maybe Noki, you can help us. We have a question about importing precompiled functions in the context of Azure Function. It wasn't clear how we transfer the files that in the bin directory that we have locally, basically DLLs, in Azure Functions, and after that call just the methods inside of the Azure Function.
I have answer right now. So
Yeah. What is the best way to contact the team? Feedback?
Typically, MSA forum or Stack Overflow,
Okay.
and I think Monday. So,
Okay.
yeah. Or that free.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Okay, how are you? You look busy.
Yeah. Every time this event, or another event.
It's okay. You have a lot of events here. It's okay.
Similar and